Hello, welcome to Priory Padock. The spring equinox has come and gone, and we're well on into the 40 days of Lent now, so at least in theory spring should be pretty well evident by now. That's certainly the opinion of the rooks, as you can probably hear behind me cawing from the tops of the trees by the priory as they refurbish their nests. The rooks find the paddock a convenient source building materials, and they can often be seen hopping about in the tops of the taller trees, the alder and ash trees at the very top of the paddock, hopping about in the tops and selecting exactly the right twig they need for the particular refurbishment. They're big birds with strong, broad bills, and they can break off quite sizable sticks with relative ease. It's interesting to see them breaking them off, but it's even more interesting to see them seeing them flying away with really quite large pieces of stick in their beaks. One of the features of the paddock has been the effort that we've put into a useful place for pollinating insects, and we have a number of different bumblebees here. The queens hibernate over the winter, and they emerge from the year. They need the sunshine to give them the energy to fly. They feed up on the flowers that are available, and then they can often be seen searching around in the leaf litter under the bushes and along the sides of the walls, looking for sites for this season's nest. They very often use an old mouse hole or something similar and build their new nest in there. We've seen three to identify so far this year. You can often see them flitting about in the very tops of the pussy willow, in the very tops of the trees. But it's difficult to see what colour they are there. But if you manage to catch them down on the ground, you can get a much better view of them. And we've had a white-tailed bumblebee, and we've had a red-tailed bumblebee, and we've had a smaller male, which is, I believe, called the early bumblebee. There are, I think, 26 different bumblebees in Britain, but only 7 or so are relatively widespread. And if you're interested, the Friends of the Earth have an excellent website called, as you might expect, How to Identify British Bumblebees, and there you can find very good, very clear photographs of the common species and a little bit about each of them, which will certainly inform your enthusiasm for them. I don't know whether you could hear that, but most opportunely at that moment, a queen white-tailed bumblebee came flying past my ankle looking for a possible nest site. Right on cue, as you might say. At the bottom of the paddock, the gorse bushes have got a good amount of blossom on them. They often look at their best at this time of the year. The tops of the willow trees, as I said, are smothered in pussy willow at the moment. But apart from that, there isn't a great deal else as yet. coming along by the wall from the gate, I can see some wild strawberry flowers on the wall. Small 5-petaled flowers with a yellow centre, and near the notice board there are some strong growing hairy looking stalks and leaves that look as though they've got spikes on them, and bright blue flowers. This is alkanet, and much can see the white bells of comfrey. That was one of the, in the days of before modern medicine, the comfrey was a very important herb, and its popular name was knitbone. It was used to make poultices for broken bones. Perhaps the most obvious flowers in the paddock at the moment are the daffodils. There are lots of daffodils in the paddock. Some of them have gone over, but there's still a good show in most of the areas, and there are one or two smaller flowers to be seen as well. There are celandines. They look like buttercups, but they're slightly more shiny, and they have heart-shaped leaves. And I found a violet. There's a violet by one of the bushes here. That has heart-shaped leaves as well. Coming on a bit further, beside the pond, we've got some primroses, and in the pond itself there are lots of very large heart-shaped leaves, dark glossy green leaves with big fat buds and 5-petaled bright yellow, shiny yellow flowers. Again, they look very much like large buttercups, and this is kingcup or marsh marigold. There's some frog spawn in the pond, not a lot, and most of what there has been here has now sunk below the surface of the water, but there's still a bit visible. And on the far side of the pond, on the other side of the boardwalk, under some of the trees, there are tiny yellow flowers which are golden saxifrage. And between the far wall and the Gunnera manicata, our Brazilian giant rhubarb, has been covered with a fleece blanket to protect it from the frost, but it's now growing. The sunshine has obviously warmed it under its blanket, and it's growing very strongly, and some of the fresh leaves under the blanket are about 3 feet high already, so I think we'll have to remove the blanket before very long. Coming further on up the paddock, past the pond and the well, fresh leaves on the buddleia and the alder, and there's the forsythia bush here with 5-petaled yellow flowers on it, and very striking because it's covered in blossom, but there are no leaves as yet. Looking from here further up the paddock, it's opened out completely now. The large stand, the block stand of 5-foot high stems of codlins and cream, which stood here throughout the winter to provide shelter and seed heads for the birds, that has now been cut as part of our annual maintenance, and the paddock has opened up beautifully to the extent that you can now see under the trees down the left hand side of the paddock there are a fine display of spring flowers. The best spring flowers are always the ones in woodland, because for obvious reasons, they have to grow, they have to produce leaves, they have to produce flowers and set seed all in the short period of open to the sunlight before the leaves on the trees open above them and they're shaded out. So under the taller trees at the top there is a fine carpet of celandine flowers, these bright yellow flowers with anything between 8 and 13 petals sometimes. There are sword-shaped leaves of bluebells, and on one or two, I can just see one or two buds, and there's an ambulance going past in the distance. You'll have to be for a second. There we are. That proves this is a field recording. The bluebells, there are spikes of buds, and the first bluebells are just beginning to open. There are one or two nice white wood anemone flowers, and lots of the glossy shield-shaped leaves with black specks on them of the wild arum, the wild British lily. And whilst there are lots of leaves as yet, I can't see any flower spikes yet. So there we are. That's what there is to see this month. If you come back next month, I expect